Right, so today's Friday. It is thundering and lightning. Yud Gimel Elul. Tov Shnai Vav. Yud Gimel Elul, I believe, is the wedding anniversary of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe. So it's Yud Gimel Elul Tov Shnai Vav, and we are at Teres Menachem Sefer HaMamorim Tov Shin Yud Gimel in the Maimer of Basi Legani, Yud Shvat Tov Shin Yud Gimel, and we are on page Pei Aleph in the middle of Ois Dalid. We're up to a Bifrat that is 10 lines from the bottom. The line starts Mipnimius Haratzen at the full stop. The Rebbe is explaining over here the point that he made earlier, that a Yid that transgresses even a slight instruction, a very seemingly insignificant or a minor instruction of Divrei Sofrim from our sages, is worse, is lower than someone, a Ben Noach, who believes in Shituf, in partnership to Hashem, even though Shituf for a Yid, for a Ben Yisrael, for a Jew, would be considered idolatry. Nevertheless, transgressing a diktuk kal shel divrei sofrim, in the sense of being separated from Hashem or going against Hashem's will, that is worse than for a Ben Noach to believe in Shituf, because a Ben Noach, the Rebbe said, is not instructed, hasn't been given the instruction to not believe in Shituf in partnership. So by believing that, he's not transgressing Hashem's will, even though that for a Yid would be considered idolatry. Whereas transgressing a diktuk kal shel divrei sofrim, a minor instruction of the sages, is going against Hashem's will. Why is that? So the Rebbe went into this whole discussion of Shituf and the two different divine energies that function within the world. One is known as Mamala Kalam and one is known as Seir Kalam, and Mamala being the one that clothes itself interiorly and is tailored according to each and every creature and creation, according to its personal characteristics. So therefore, from the perspective of Mamala Kalam, you must say that existence is meaningful, otherwise it wouldn't be tailored according to the specific characteristics of creation. Whereas from the perspective of Seir Kalam, and certainly from the perspective of Atzmos, the very essence of Hashem, creation, it's Einheit. There's no other existence besides Hashem. Why? And that is reflected in the way it relates to creation, in the sense that it's all-encompassing, transcendent, etc. So therefore, a Ben Noach U'Mesoilam that reach only up to the level of Memalek Almin, Shituf is not a problem, because Memalek Almin is such a divine energy that gives room for other existence. Whereas from the perspective of Seviv and Atzmos, Einheit, there is not only is there no other God or no other force, there is no other existence besides Hashem. Why indeed? The Rebbe went then even further and explained why indeed the Umas Ha'olam have a relationship only insofar as Memalek Olam is concerned, and Bnei Yisrael go even higher to Sefer Kalam and to Atzmos. That is, the Rebbe said, the difference between Pnimius Ratzon and Chitzonius Ratzon. There is Hashem's intended purpose in creation, and then there is the mode of achieving it, the means to achieve that. So the purpose is Dir B'Tachteinim, a dwelling place for Hashem down here below. The purpose is Torah and Mitzvahs. Bereishis, Beis Reishis, Bishvil, Beis, the Chazal say, Beis Reishis, Bishvil, Yisrael Bishvil HaTorah. Creation is Bishvil, for Yisrael and for Torah. That is the goal. The means is creation and everything that's contained within creation. So in the goal, in the ultimate purpose, you have Pnimius Ratzon, and that's what he wants, that's what he actually desires. in the means, you also have desire, but a more exterior element of desire, because he desires that for the purpose of something else. So therefore, Bnei Yisrael are associated with Seviv and even higher Atzmos, whereas U'Misayel Bnei Neach are related to, and all of creation is related to Chetzenis Ratzon, the more exterior aspect of Ratzon, right? That's where we're up to. Now this is insofar as just neutral creation or creatures or creation is concerned. Or befrat haklipa v'sitra achra, particularly when we talk about the shell and the opposite side of kedusha, right? Shekol hakavona behem hu sheha'adam yizgaber aleim lachfay Elohim. The whole intended purpose of their creation is so that man can strengthen himself and overcome them and to submit them to holiness, right? So there's certainly, what's their purpose? They are something which on the surface appears, and they are something which is negative, right? They interfere, as it were, with the avodah of the person. But that is what they were created for. So a klippa and a sitra achra that opposes kedusha is not going against Hashem's will. In fact, what's the klippa and sitra achra doing at that point? If the klippa and sitra achra would suddenly decide to become achsidish yid, they would be going against their intended purpose in creation, right? So when klippa and sitra achra opposes kedusha, they're fulfilling Hashem's will. Whereas a yid, even when it's only a transgression over a minor institution of the sages, is going against Hashem's will. So in that sense, he is separating himself, and he is lower than klippa and sitra achra. So the klippa and sitra achra are what? Are also rooted where? In chetzenis ratzon, in the exterior aspect of Hashem's will. Why? Because what's their intended purpose? Hashem doesn't intend the klippa and the sitra achra that they should remain opposing to kedusha. He created them so that they should be transformed, so that they should be made submissive to kedusha. Being that they are rooted where? Only in the exterior aspect of Hashem's will. And chetzenis ratzon comes in the divine energy, in the form of the divine energy of Memale, the divine energy that fills worlds, and from the perspective of the Be'erim Memale Yeshem, since it's Mokim, L'Dover Shechutz Mimenu, and in the divine energy that fills worlds, that is tailored according to the aspect of each and every creature. There is room for something which is outside of him, because as mentioned before, Memale does reckon with the particular characteristics of each and every creature. Therefore, Bnei Noach and Umas Olam are not instructed on partnership as a prohibition. It is only through contemplation, through thinking about it. They will know, and they are instructed upon this, that there is existence which is higher than them, and from their life force. And what do they refer to it? The God of gods, right? So they believe there is a Lakaya. And then there's also a Lakah. But there's partnership. Therefore, and for them, as mentioned before, this does not constitute idolatry. There's no prohibition for Bnei or Muslim to believe, not to believe in, there's no prohibition against believing in partnership. That there might be another being which, yes, Hashem gave that being the power, but that once he's been given that power, now he assists. The task is to assist Hashem in his conduct of the world, as it were.
Is believing and serving.
That's a very good point you make, because I believe, there's two things. There's belief. If you believe something which is idolatrous, it could be called kfira. It's not necessarily avodah zarah, it's kfira. Denial of Hashem's oneness. Idolatry would be what? Serving. So believing and serving, it's a long discussion in terms of the Rambam and so on and so forth, but there might be something in what you're saying. But be that as it may, we're talking about, would it be either actual idolatry or idolatrous belief? Okay, so I'm using a catch-all, as it were. So therefore, V'lochin, and therefore ha'adam ever aveda, a person who actually commits a transgression upon which he was instructed not to commit it, who garu yeser maklipa v'sitracha. He is far worse than what? Than the shell and the opposite of kedusha. Why? Because as just mentioned, klipa sitracha, by opposing godliness, is not what? Going against, it's actually fulfilling the purpose for which it was created. For although for a ben neach or for u'b'sayim to believe that Hashem is the God of gods, meaning that there is partnership, would constitute avodah zarah for whom? For a yid that would be considered idolatrous. It would be against Hashem's will. Nonetheless, they do not, by believing this, do not go against the level of Hashem's will to which they have an association, which is which level? Which gives room for other existence. This is not the case concerning a Jew who commits a sin, who commits a transgression. It doesn't matter what. He's not talking about committing idolatry. He's talking about even what was mentioned before, a diktu kal shel divrei sofrim, a minor instruction of the sages. Being that a Jew, a Ben Yisrael, is rooted where? In the internal aspect of Hashem's will, which is mentioned before, does not give room for other existence, because from the perspective of Pnimis Ratzon, which in other words is Sevav Kalalman, and certainly Atzmos, from that perspective, Ein Oid, there's not only no other God, but there's no other existence. L'chein hine afshe eisei hadover. Top of page Rebbe's Atzmei Eitzel U'Masa Elam Ein Zemerida, even though this act, which the Yid now commits, so far as the Umas Ha'elam the B'nei HaKashon, it would not be considered what? Going against Hashem's will. B'Yisrael hu merida. For a Jew, this is considered merida, rebellion. Why? Kivin shu heipech haratzon shu kasher imay. Because it goes against the level of ratzon, level of will, of Hashem's will, the pnimius ratzon, the internal aspect of Hashem's will, with which a Yid is tied. Mit welchen is verbunden, says the Rebbe in Yiddish in brackets, with which he is tied. And therefore, hu garua yeser, he is worse, he's lower, mehaklipa b'sitra achra, from the shell and the opposite of kedusha, b'nifrid b'tachas melakus, and by committing that act, even though it's a minor act, in the sense, because it's against Hashem's will, he becomes totally separated from godliness. Right? Now, what's the point? The point is, so if that's the case, how could he eat sin? Like the Zohar said, nefesh kisechta, tvova. Says the Rebbe, v'liyais, all this is a build-up to explain the Ruach Shtus. V'liyais, shebeteva kol Yisrael. Who? That the nature, being that the nature of every Jew is, she'enei reitza, he does not want, v'enei yochel, and he cannot, liyas nifrad melakus, to be separated from godliness. L'chein einei shayach klal she'avar avera. Therefore, it is impossible, naturally, for a Jew to commit a transgression. Why? Because it's not something minor. By committing that act, the Jew becomes totally separated from godliness. It is only because of the spirit of folly, which covers the truth, right? Because of which the Mishum Zeh, and because of that spirit of folly that covers the truth, Nidmelei, the Jew, imagines it seems to him that by doing this act, even this minor act, he does not become separated from godliness. How do we know that a Jew does not want and cannot be separated from godliness? We see that, unfortunately, it sometimes happens that we do transgress a dikduk kal shel divrei sofrim, and maybe, God forbid, even sometimes something more severe. So where is the qualification for the statement that a Jew does not want and cannot be separated from godliness? Just want to mention that the expression is, I believe this is from the Tanya, that a Yid he says two things. He doesn't want and he cannot be separated. Why the double expression? It's not just a double expression. It's also going to be important for what we're going to learn later on. The soul has 5 levels. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. Nefesh being, that's an ascending order. Nefesh being the active part of the soul. The Kabbalah's oil that propels the person on to have the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, to follow what Hashem wants, to act in accordance with Hashem's will. Ruach is related to the emotions. Neshama is related to the intellect. Chaya is Rotzen. And Yechida is the essence. Right? That's basically, let's use those terms. In Yechida, the Rebbe is going to start explaining in chapter 5, there are two aspects to Yechida. There's Yechida there's the part of the Yechida which is called by the name Yechida, which is the Nitzutz Nivra, that's the spark of the creation, the created being. And then there's the part of the Yechida which is the Nitzutz Beiri, the spark of the Creator, which fuse as one and they constitute Yechida. Now, if you remember, if you learned the Maimer Va'ata Tetzaveh, the last Maimer that Rebbe handed out, last edited Maimer that Rebbe handed out, right? Over there, he talks about Emunah. And he talks about two levels in Emunah. There's a level of Emunah that emanates from Chaya, and there's a level of Emunah that emanates from Yechida. If you're talking about intellectual rationalization that there is Hashem, that's not Emunah. Emunah is beyond rationality. So you're talking about the levels of Chaya and Yechida. So the Rebbe explains over there that from the perspective of Chaya, a Jew sees godliness. And if you see something, as the expression goes, seeing is believing, even though it may not make any rational sense. Right? But what does seeing denote? That there's you and there's the object. There's you and there's that which you see. So you and that which you see are still two separate entities. Yechida, the soul doesn't see godliness. It is godliness. That's what it is. Similarly here, when we talk Yachol, when you say a Jew does not want to be separate from godliness, that is from the level of Chaya. Rotzen. Chaya is Rotzen. Because Chaya, the level of the soul of Chaya is so high and it sees godliness, it does not want to be separated from godliness. Yechida is godliness, therefore Eine Yochel. It cannot be separated, that's what it is. And that goes to the two nitzutzes that I just mentioned before, that I was going to discuss it. In Eis Hey, the nitzutz nivra. No, because we see that in actual fact the point is...
If there's no separation, then there's no capacity for it to do
That's exactly the point. Eine Yochel. That is exactly...
Then it has no... It's not even a discussion.
Of course it's not a discussion, but the question is, how is it then possible for a Jew to sin? We see in actual fact that people do commit transgressions. How is that possible? Oh, that's exactly the point. So that's what the Rebbe says over here. But over here the Rebbe is going to qualify, how do we know that a Jew does not want and cannot be separated from godliness? So the Rebbe is going to make the point going forward that we see that when a Jew is challenged, when he's face to face with a reality where there's no two ways about it, what does the Ruch Shtus do? The Ruch Shtus basically says to the Jew, you're not separated, it covers the truth. But when a Jew comes face to face with a reality that there's no two ways about it, that by committing this act he will become separated from godliness, on the whole, people will go Mr. Nefesh. Where does that come from? So in other words, you're drawing on the Chaya and Yechida into your actual behavior. In the normal course of things, the Ruach Shtus could conceal. Right? We know, if you remember, we learned in Chassidus, some of the Maimonim, there's the expression, opposed to each aspect of the nefesh, of the soul, there is a le'umazah, there's the opposite. Nefesh has its opposing force included. Ruach the same, Neshama the same, Chaya the same. Yechida does not have an opposition. Bavua less little. They don't have the shadow of the Gemara. We discussed it once in the past. Chassidus uses this as a phrase, Kabbalah uses it as a phrase to denote that there is no opposition to what? To Yechida. Right? So therefore, when you come to face, where, God forbid, now this means I am separated from godliness. You got Mesiras Nefesh. Why? Because Eine Reitza and higher Eine Yachol cannot be separated from godliness. And it's only the Ruach Shtus that could cover up on the Nefesh or on the Ruach or on the Neshama or on the Chaya, right? Where there could be a possibility for transgression. So therefore that proves that it's the nature of each and every of a Yid. It's natural not to be able to be separated from godliness. That's why we need an explanation. How does it come about? And the explanation is the Ruach Shtus. More about that, Mr. Shem on Sunday.
More about that.